Welcome to Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and me, Jim Cunningham.
Jim.
How are you?
I'm good. Did kids sing Jim Jiminy, Jim Jiminy, Jim Jimgery to it when you were a kid?
There wasn't a lot of singing. No.
I thought you were raised in an orphanage where everybody sang.
I think you're thinking of the movie Annie.
Oh, I was thinking of Oliver, actually, but
that too.
I mixed it up with Mary Poppins. We're off to a flying start here on Tangents. Those of you playing the Tangents drinking game, all right, you're ready to go. We are delighted to be back with Season 4, Episode 19. 19. Yes. The end is near. And because the end is near, we're talking to someone for whom the end is near all the time, someone who lives in a world of terror, our good friend Matt Dunn.
He's a fascinating guy, great magician, but he and I share a passion for the holiday of Halloween.
And he has monetized it more than you have, actually, which is...
Apparently, I guess everybody monetizes things more than I do.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
At least you've accepted it.
I do. There's no sense. I'm not going to be on the dais.
Yes.
Gold, silver, nor bronze.
Oh, dear.
And also ran.
Well, I was introduced to Matt Dunn by our mutual friend, Bill Arnold, when I was working on the very first Eli Marks book, The Ambitious Card. And I said I need to take magic lessons. And Bill said, go talk to Suzanne. And I said, I need to see a restaurant magician. And he said, we're already seeing Suzanne, but someone who does a little bit differently is Matt Dunn. And we went and saw Matt Dunn perform at a restaurant, which was really fun. And I struck up a friendship with him. And then I remember, as part of my research, he let me come with him and act as his roadie at what are those Boy Scout things called? The Blue and Gold?
Blue and Gold dinner?
Yeah, we went and did that. I watched him do that, which was really interesting. He, kind of does it all as a magician, as he has for years and years, but he also has a degree as an entrepreneur. And he has turned that degree into a Halloween theme park. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As with most of our interviews, the first thing we did was you asked him his magic origin story.
So, Matt, one of the first things we always do is just get sort of a magical origin story for you. How'd you come to magic?
How did I come to magic? First of all, nice to see you. Thanks for coming over.
I cannot believe this house, Matt. This is where a magician should live. Is Bill Bixby here somewhere?
I live here.
It's unbelievable, Matt. It's a showpiece, and I haven't even been out to the treehouse.
Right. Well, we'll get you out to the treehouse. It's $50, but the how did I get into magic? It's not. I wish I had a better story. It's not that exciting. I went. I had a neighbor that had a magic kit, and I borrowed it constantly. And finally, they said, "Just please take it and stop, bothering us." And I liked it. And then I had a neighbor that was very encouraging that said, "You should keep doing this." And she looked up in the yellow pages. I think that's where we found Eagle Magic Store. And went down and started buying tricks and doing shows. And this particular neighbor that encouraged me, she was the first one to hire me, and then her friends hired me, and it just snowballed.
How old were you at this point?
Probably 10.
That's fabulous. Do you remember the first trick you learned?
No, but I remember I have a nice Polaroid picture of me in my Sunday blazer doing this show for this woman's birthday child, and it was my first show, and my table was a styrofoam cooler with a bed sheet over it, and I was doing probably 20th century silks, and it just, that was it.
At 10 years old, you've been doing it ever since?
Ever since.
2 summers at a magic camp in California.
That was a big deal. If I had not gone to West Coast Wizards Magic Camp in Idlewild, California, which is up in the mountains, I don't think I would be doing this today. It was a total game changer, and I was completely clueless as to the people that were coming up there. They had just legends of magic that... Yeah,
like who?
We're like, well, who's Billy McCollum? Who's this old guy?
Wow.
Who's Carol Fox? Why is he teaching us anything? Like, I don't get it. So And a lot of the people that were up there as well were taking it seriously and went on to have big careers. Justin Willman left the year prior to me arriving, and there were just even the counselors that were up there really went on. Eric Buss and just tons of people, Andy Amex, that were willing to share their craft and teach us a ton about not only the craft but the business.
How old were you at that point?
That was, I probably did 15 and 16 or 16 and 17 up there. So it was a good time for me to be thinking about what am I going to do with my life and my career, and really gave me the mindset that this is something I could do.
Yeah, well, apparently you can. You graduated from St. Thomas University, which is right in my nape of the neck, my neck of the wape. Degree in entrepreneurship. Now, I guess I don't. What does that mean exactly?
It means you're not sure what you want to do with your life, and you're gonna find something that you enjoy and start it. But also, it's about the creative of finding what you want to do, having that creativity, but then learning the business acumen to try to run your own show, essentially.
And apparently that too has worked for you. Talk about how that degree helped you market yourself as a magician, and we'll get to the other stuff you've done, maybe with that degree as well. But how did it help you market yourself?
I enjoyed my time at St. Thomas. I thought it was a great experience. I probably wouldn't have done it again. It was because I'm already kind of a creative person. So some of these creative classes I was taking, I didn't necessarily find too helpful, but it gets your wheels turning. And the business side of it was also helpful. I'm sure there were classes that I enjoyed, but I would have rather have gotten right out into the real world and started working a little bit earlier than taking 4 years of college. But good experience, good time.
So you, at one point, have sold some merchandise. Maybe you still are on the web, yeah?
I am interested in trying everything, and that was something I tried once to just see, maybe sell a little magic kit. But I think for anybody who's interested in trying to run their own business, to keep trying different things, see what works, see what doesn't work, try it in a small way. You don't always have to dive in and spend thousands of dollars for your first business or your attempt at something. That's what's fun about entrepreneurship, is you can try all this stuff. And I think if somebody's thinking about wanting to do their own thing, it's just what I just said. You don't necessarily need a ton of money. You can start little by little, and that's how I started with magic, and then that's how I eventually got into Halloween, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But little bites at a time.
Speaking of little bites, beautiful home. You got a little bite right outside the tree house. We have not toured it. I'm told we'll get to tour it before we're done here. Where did the idea come from to build a tree house?
Jim, I'm not sure you know who you're interviewing here.
Apparently I don't.
It's an adult child. It's not good. It's bad, in fact.
I think you might even have the order of those words wrong.
Thank you,
I think
John.
it's child, adult.
Yeah. It's not. It's bad. It's a child, adult, whatever you want to call me. It's unhealthy. I'm constantly trying to figure out how to put a train track through multiple rooms in the house. It basically is going to be a TGI Fridays here eventually. It's
well, I'll eat here. If the house is any indication of what the food might be like, I'll be a regular.
I like tree houses. I had a tree house when I was a kid, and I always thought kind of a big fantasy tree house would be fun. And it was bigger than I anticipated. When we were working on it, it was suddenly I went like, this will be good. And then I realized, okay, this is a 2-story home in the trees, and the squirrels are kind of looking at me. But so yeah, it's a fun place to just go out and hang. And now I call it affectionately the Eagle Magic Store Treehouse, because it has a lot of Eagle Magic Store memorabilia. And eventually I'm hoping that Larry Kalo, the proprietor of Eagle Magic, still has the store sign from down in Minneapolis. So I'd like to ask him for the 200th time to let me put that on the treehouse. So someday.
He absolutely will. And folks, I'm not kidding. Matt's not kidding. It's not a treehouse like you have ever seen. It's not even what today we would call a tiny house. This is an enormous. I'm surprised there's a tree big enough to hold this.
It's inappropriate. Yeah. It's garish.
It's 4 trees, isn't it? At least
it was 4 trees. 2 have died. Luckily, we've got footings, legs underneath the thing to support it, which I was talked into initially. So I'm glad it's there, because the trees are trees are in trouble.
We will have in the show notes, we'll have a link to a video of us walking through it. And then there's at least one other good YouTube video
Yeah.
I'll link to as well.
Yeah, please.
That shows it. It is. And we'll also have a link to you walking through the house. Jim will give us a little tour of the house.
It's incredible, folks. If you, in fact, I'd say stop this right now. Go look at those because and then come back to us. Obviously, I don't want you to just walk away, but you should see this stuff so that you know when I'm talking about something, I'm not kidding around. This is first rate. Let's talk about that theater.
Will we be, however, filming the final pat down when you leave?
There will be, my understanding was there would be no pat down.
There's a metal detector you got to go through. And
Oh,
get out the
no.
wall.
Very good.
That's terrible. I better put
Honor-
these cups and ball sets back.
Honor policy.
Yeah.
Great. The theater.
Yeah, talk to me about the theater because you have, I mean, not just magicians. That'd be cool enough in that theater, but you have some huge, big name magicians come perform in this theater for you, your friends. You invite other people like me. I've been invited once or twice.
I've been invited.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 27-person seat theater, so it's not huge, but it's not microscopic, but it's a nice intimate room. It's got some history with it. The seats are from the old Northrop Auditorium, so you lift up the seat, and underneath is the place to put your top hat because nobody wants to have you wearing a top hat when you're sitting in front of them. So there's some fun history with them, and it's ended up being a great space just to invite performers, whether some of our local greats to international folk, and I like to open it up a couple times a year to the public, let them come and host a couple private events. So it's worked out well for me as well with shows. I have some people will come and rent the whole house, and I'll do a show for them in the theater, and everybody has a really fun experience.
It's knockout cool.
Thank you.
I mean, it really is.
Thank you.
It's what every performer, I think, dreams. Someday, I'd love to have a house with a small theater in it,
Yeah.
so that I could do a few things or invite people
Yeah.
to. And you actually achieved that.
When it's a good little practice space too, because you really, to practice something, you gotta be on stage and get the feel of
Get the lights in your eyes.
lights in your eyes. And
Absolutely, flight time
Some
is
of the
important.
people who've swung by.
so Johnny Ace Palmer came, phenomenal guy. He's been on Letterman. Ed Alonzo was a huge crowd favorite. He was on the TV show from the 80s, Saved by the Bell, and has still been very relevant in magic. Super knowledgeable guy. There's dents in the ceiling from the standing ovations. He got it every single show. Absolutely phenomenal. And the man is a beast for magic fans that are listening. If you know anything about Ed Alonzo, you may not know, this man is getting older. He pounded out 5 shows for me one night between the hours of like 7 and midnight, and he just did them back to back. And I told him, do like 25 minutes. He did 50 minutes, reset in 5, and did it again. And again, standing ovation every show. The man delivered crazy. So if you ever have a special event, you're looking for someone else on the roster, think about him. He's incredible. Based in Los Angeles.
Who else have you had here?
Who else? David Sandy came and performed. Of course, Susanna's a local magician. She's great. She's been in there.
Chris with the hand.
Chris, yeah, that's right. Christopher Hart. Yeah, and he came, and boy, that guy he's a real talent. That was really, really fun. So in November of this year, we've got Mike Caveney and Tina Leonard are coming to town to perform.
Oh,
They're both going to come and do their whole thing, and I'm super excited
Can
for
we
that.
buy our tickets right
yeah.
now?
I was going to say. I wonder.
I'll ask the right people, and we'll see.
Tina performed at my wedding.
Did she?
She did.
Okay. I think I knew that. So you hired her to perform at your wedding.
It was supposed to be Arden James. I don't know if you know Arden.
Real.
Out of Wisconsin. Great little mime act.
Okay.
And his father was sick, and Bill Arnold was doing triple espresso in Ireland.
Yeah.
And he was really upset that he couldn't be at the wedding.
Okay.
And I emailed him and said, emergency, I need a wedding performer. And 5 minutes later, he emailed me a link and said, you don't know her, but she's perfect.
Great.
And I called her, and she was willing to do it and flew out here.
What act did she do? Did
She did Mop Man.
She did?
Yeah.
Wow. And I bet that was a big hit.
Huge.
Killed.
Shit.
Killed. Could it be any better?
Were you
at
there?
a wedding? Yeah. Not only was I there, I sort of hosted that event.
How many years ago was this?
21, 22.
Boy, I'm glad you came up with that on a.
Yeah, 21, 22, something like that.
You had to reach in
2002.
deep there. You saw that.
2002.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I wasn't that far from reach.
Well, you tilted your head back and you looked up at the sky where you find numbers. So it was long enough ago. But in case your wife ever listens to the podcast, mine never does. So
Not gonna
I think
happen.
we're safe there.
Doesn't matter.
30. Let's not get into it. I think Matt.
No, they're
is not ready.
fantastic, and I'd love to come see them again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm suspicious that one might sell out because people are. I have a couple people I've already told. Or
I could write a check right now if you want.
For both of
I
us.
told David Sandy and Lance Rich. They know these guys well, and I said I told them they were coming to town. They were like, "Oh my, we're getting our tickets. We're coming now." I go, "What are you talking about? Don't you see these guys all the time?" And they go, "Who cares? We're still coming."
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
That's
tremendous.
a date. We'll bring
performers.
Rachel and Amy and have a good time.
Hey, how about that?
Yeah.
What do you think the train and the Applebee's thing will be up by then?
We'll see. We'll see. The alligator moat has been moved to the top of the list.
Good.
So it's
Good.
all. I'm trying to be conservative, Jim.
Yeah, I don't. Well, we'll find dinner somewhere. I don't want to in any way, shape, or form. But let's talk now because I'm Halloween, as Eugene Berger, who has not been yet mentioned on this podcast, would always say it's my favorite religious holiday, and it's certainly mine. Are you a big fan of Halloween, or are you just in the Halloween business?
I'm a big fan because I started legitimately in enjoying Halloween. I liked the prank element of it. I liked the surprise element of it. Of course, these magic shops had costumes and other Halloween paraphernalia. So that was a perfect fit. And next thing you know, that was what I enjoyed. In fact, I didn't even like really necessarily being scared myself, but I liked the theatrical, decorating, kind of creative part of Halloween. And that's what I did in my parents' home for years. And my teachers will, I'm sure, remember me begging to step into their office so I could use the phone and call the newsrooms and pitch these stories. And I have, just VHS tape after VHS tape of all these live trucks that came to my parents' home and it was crazy. But even at that time, I liked just the promotion of it, the marketing, and having people come see this kind of unusual experience.
And your parents were supportive of that?
They were, but my poor mother, she, came from New York and kind of a proper gal, and she would be like, "Oh my gosh, there's a live truck in the front yard, honey, I can see our garage on Channel 5, and they were very tolerant, very tolerant.
Where are they now? Are your folks still with us?
They're still with us. They just moved into a nice place in downtown Wayzata and are enjoying a smaller home and retirement. And
Do you still decorate for them?
no,
You're not. Are you allowed in?
no,
the house?
I'm allowed to come over and put up the Christmas tree and then immediately leave.
I
That's
understand.
the extent of the decorating. That's my punishment now.
So let's talk about Screamtown, because in terms of Halloween events here in Minnesota, where we are and where the podcast is based, Screamtown has to be the premier Halloween event, and I can
It's
say
nice of you
that,
to say.
including the
Yes.
Halloween event that I put
And
on.
you're part of Halloween. You're involved.
So, but talk to us about Screamtown.
It's been a long labor of love as we're going into our 20th year of doing this season. And it's, I never took out a loan for any of this stuff. It was always just little by little, kind of what I said earlier about if you want to go start something that you enjoy, it was just, growth little by little. And people would come out and see that we put a ton back into the show every year. I mean, you come out to the event. If you haven't been there in 2 years, you're going to go, whoa. If you haven't been there in 3 or 4 years, you're going to, I don't even recognize this place. This is totally different. Always reinventing stuff, always redoing things. This year for us, we're adding 2 new attractions. So we have 7 attractions. We added a hayride 5 years ago, and the hayride, I could talk to you about that. That's a whole other thing. But we're adding a lot of it at Screamtown this season for 2024. A lot of little things that we always wish we wanted to do that we don't always have the time to. So you're going to see actors this year come out of the ground. You're going to see actors fly over your head. You're going to see actors that look like they're floating towards you. So different effects that we just want to really hone in on. And we're also, this is exciting, it says a Screamtown. Yeah, we have all these facades around for the attractions, but those are the only facades we have. So this season, we're just building more town just to kind of make it seem more interesting, like a village. and we're doing cool storefront windows. So it's going to be a lot of neat stuff to look at. And some of them you'll even be able to go into for photo ops. So tons of stuff on the docket for this season. But the hayride,
Yeah,
if I may,
I wish.
I wish you could come out and see this.
I wish I could. I bet there's a time I can.
I would think so. It
Why,
is.
why is there, just for the audience, why is there
Well, because I do a Halloween show too. Mine is like a little piece of theater. We talked about Eugene Berger. That's two. If you're scoring from home, take another hit. I do this Halloween show that Eugene taught me, and so I'm generally working during that season when
Yep.
your show is up.
Yep.
But I think you probably do many more nights than we do, so I should be able to get out there. And I really would. In 20 years, I've never been there. How can
You
that
gotta
be?
come. Well, you gotta come see this hayride.
Yeah.
Because I have had people that go around the country to this stuff that say you reinvented it, and I kind of knew it when we were doing it. I said nobody is doing what we're doing, and it's not just like, oh, everyone's dressed up as bunny rabbits. This is so different. No, the wagons themselves, very expensive, custom. I don't even want to give away too much because when people get there, they go, "What is this?"
Yeah.
And then when they're in these things and they're experiencing the ride, it is unlike anything you've ever been a part of. And if you're not startled and surprised, it'd be mind blown. There's some things built into these wagons that you never expect, and so it incorporates as many special effects as we can think of, but then also there's magic. So as you go through these different scenes, you're gonna see stuff where when you're done with the hayride, you're not gonna say, well, that was a magic show, but you're gonna say, did they do that? So I'm confused. They went over and chopped off someone's head and then picked it up and put it on a table and it was still alive. How in the world did that happen?
Yeah.
So
and you're using magic techniques
yeah,
that other Halloween themed things.
they don't even know about. They
Right.
can't, and that's the kind of the advantage is because I'm a magician, I can look at it in a different way and come up with these things that happen that I think other folks who are in this industry would go, well, I don't know how that happened either.
Yeah. So we saw some of the stuff here that you are gathering for these storefronts. And the first thing that came to my mind was this is almost Disney-esque in what
I
you're...
love Disney.
Do you?
Harry Potter world, I usually get arrested. I mean, I'm touching everything. They're like, sir, you can't open that door, and I'm still doing it. Like, I love it. And and in particular, those, have you been to Harry Potter world?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
villages and the way
Yeah.
that's just been created. And those storefront windows, they're so cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we want to do is we want to create something that's like that.
Did the Haunted Mansion...
Of course, damaged me. I totally damaged me. I mean, they were like, sir, there's a 12 loop limit. Like I was going, oh, that's all I wanted to do. And then we had friends growing up whose the father had like the ultimate VIP, whatever pass, and they would let him, you could do whatever he wanted to. And they took us on some behind the scenes tour explaining how a lot of the effects worked and got to go to this area. And I'm, freaking out. Damn it. I mean, just hugely memorable, affected my life, could never forget it.
A
Crazy.
great mix of magic and scary,
Right?
Disney
And that, having never been there, so I can't speak from personal experience, but that's the big difference is that many of the Halloween events that I have attended, people jump out at you with
we
a
do
chainsaw.
that.
Sure, yeah. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying that's where it starts and ends with the
Yeah.
majority
Right.
of these kinds of events.
Right.
People with a chainsaw jump out at you when you don't expect it and you scream and that's it. You've got a whole deal going on here.
We're
that's-
trying as hard as we can
Yeah.
to do any type of different effects that we can think of.
What do you think is the appeal for experiences like Screamtown or, even just your run-of-the-mill haunted house? Why are people going to those things?
Well, I hear people talk about experiential entertainment, and I think people still want to do that. They want to get out of the house and they want to do something. It's enough of this phone and the TV and put it down. Like, let's get out of the house and let's go do something. And even if you don't like scary stuff, it's funny. You come, you scream, and you laugh, and it's fun. And especially if you bring somebody who really hates it, then you get to laugh at them. And that's the whole idea.
That's really the key to the benefits
Right.
program. Is
Right.
bring somebody who hates this.
Just hates it. And wear also, I tell people too, you have to wear, this is an outdoor field. Yes, we have some indoor type feeling things, but wear appropriate shoes, enough with the ballet slippers and the high heels and your whatever else your Crocs. It's wear an appropriate shoe.
So, Jim, leave your high heels
Right.
at home.
I always have a pair in the trunk.
But I have to tell you, they look great on you today.
Thank you
You
very
really,
much. Yeah, they do something for my calves.
well, but it wouldn't hurt to shave a little. Do you see what I'm saying?
I could shave closer.
Right.
So it's
stubble that's throwing me off.
I think that's a fair assessment. You talked a little bit about the process of evolving and expanding, but that's kind of your MO. Now, I know people that work for you and work with you, and anytime I have a conversation with those people, they're always telling me Matt is constantly reinvesting in this business. He's constantly thinking of new things. Talk a little bit more about that process for us.
I think that's important for the customer, and I think it's important for my creative process just to do something new and different. And I always do want to outdo the last year. So usually when November rolls around, everybody's exhausted. And you're like, this thing, enough of this. And then inevitably within 30 days, I'm already writing down new ideas, and we're excited to go to the Halloween show, which is in St. Louis every year. And you're sick. This is the sickness. You just can't. You always want to just keep going at it and try something new.
You know, this could be a full-time job for anybody, but you also are a working magician.
Right?
How do you balance that, and how do you use that mindset of, because we all know magicians who are doing the exact same thing they did 20 years ago.
One of them is sitting in this room.
Two of
I
them
didn't
are.
want to point any
No, no.
fingers.
No.
How does that mindset affect your act?
I like my act. I've been doing it a long time. I'm sure if somebody would say that, they'd say the same thing about my show. But I am always on the lookout for new stuff. I like collecting new magic. I like collecting antique magic, which we saw earlier. But I also like new stuff. But the market, in my opinion, if anybody wants to hear this, has just gotten really flooded with a lot of garbage. And I think somebody comes up with something and they immediately think, well, this is a product, and well, let's go straight to sale, and be like, well, did you really test this out, or the quality of this product? So, but I'm always looking, and I like, so it doesn't always come into my show, but I also feel like I have a very defined character now, and there's certain things that either work with your character or not. So
How would you define Matt Dunn on stage?
how would I define me? Somebody has described me as kind of like Willy Wonka. Very, very nice, very likable, but also there's an edge that people like. It's not a mean edge, but it can come off as funny and a little like, Willy Wonka would go, everyone this way, no, don't touch that. There's a certain level of politeness and manners that I'm gonna want from an audience. So if somebody gives it to me, I'm gonna kind of give it back to them, but in a very nice way. Nobody's walking away in tears. Nobody's feeling made fun of. But it's I don't know. Maybe that answers that.
Let me, because I've seen you perform numerous times and enjoyed it every single time. I always think if David Letterman was going to do magic,
Yeah,
it would sound and feel a lot.
I love Dave.
Matt. Yeah,
I
don't we
always
all?
like Dave.
Yeah, I do
can't-
too.
I love Dave.
Yeah, but I mean, you have that same sensibility. It's not like you're doing it.
Sardonic edge
Yes,
to it.
sardonic
I
is a
channel
great
Dave.
word.
I
Yeah.
hope to yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you're doing that. I'm just
No,
saying it
but I
has
love
that
Dave, yeah.
that same sensibility to
Yes.
it. That same very sharp, very funny. But boy, you'd hate to get on the wrong side if there
But
is
I'm
a wrong
always
side. I don't
ni-
wanna
I'm
be,
always
yeah, you
nice.
are, and so is Dave. But
Yes.
that's what it always feels like to me. It's like
Right.
if Dave Letterman was going to do magic, it would sound and look a lot like
That
this.
idiot Matt Dunn.
Yes. So I guess in wrapping up, let's talk about goals. What's the ultimate goal, either for Screamtown or for yourself as a magician, or maybe both? What's the goal?
Yeah, I don't know what the next 10 years look like. I think I will always perform. I just had a stretch here where it didn't work for maybe a couple months, and I had a small in-home event come up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. And it all just came right back. What am I talking about? Like a neurosis, like I don't know what I'm doing. So no, it's like I've done 5,000 shows, but so and I said, boy, I really missed it. I love being a performer. I love being on stage. So I'll see myself doing that as long as people want to tolerate this Matt Dunn guy. I'll still keep showing up if you want me to. And then for Halloween, it's a tough business. It's also primarily outdoors, as I mentioned. It's a lot of weather dependency.
Yeah.
Last October was like a record breaker wet season. So it's kind of, I never used to have a lot of stress, and now I have some stress related to this beast, this Halloween thing. But I'd like to do it. This is our 20th year. I'd like to get up to 30 if I could and see how I'm doing at that point. But time will tell. But at least I'll keep changing stuff out there, and hopefully people come out and still keep enjoying the show.
His show is running at the same time your show, so I don't know if you ever had a chance to go over there and see it.
I up to this point I have not, but I'm going to run their schedule against my schedule and find a time to get out there. You want to go?
I could go with you. I've already looked at the videos and talked to Matt about it. It's by the looks of the video, it's a little more intense than some of us may like. But yeah, we should look at that. He's as he said, it's growing all the time, and he has a really good sense for it. As you will gather, if listeners haven't already gone to the YouTube page, there is a lovely little video that Matt did with us walking through his house, which is, imagine that you pull up at 1313 Mockingbird Lane
Exactly.
to meet the Munsters or at the Addams Family house, and you walk in and you get a private tour from Gomez. That's basically what we got at Matt's house, and his Halloween Adventureland is his house brought to life in a big way. His house is just phenomenal. If you want, stop the podcast right now and go watch that video, then come back. Please come back. But
Yes,
you'll get
please.
a sense of just how his mind works.
It's a fascinating mind, to say the least. And I'm really, really serious when I say every 12-year-old boy would love to live in that. I mean, it's just a perfect house for anybody that has ever kind of envisioned themselves as a magician living in a magical house. I mean, it's akin to the Magic Castle in terms of its secret entrances and
the level of thought that's gone into it.
Yeah, right, exactly. He doesn't do anything halfway.
He does not.
If he's going all the way, and he's going first class, which makes me really want to see Screamtown. And you're right. If it's too scary for Amy, and it is certainly too scary. My wife sometimes gets too scared watching Little House on the Prairie. So this would put her over the edge. But I'd go with you.
All right. That's a road trip that is actually quite within our means at this point. A couple other things that he said that I thought was great, because he does have a big enterprise there, but he said on entrepreneurship, you just start little by little, and that's what he did. And you get this sometimes when you think, I want to do something big, I have to do all the big parts right away.
Right.
And you don't. You don't.
That's the takeaway for me, certainly, is that take an idea and just start it in whatever way that you think you can start it. Get into it and let it grow and do it little by little. Like Matt said, no guarantees that you're going to end up with something as magical and terrifying as Screamtown or Matt's house. But I think it's just a good idea to dabble in your dreams and in art in general. Pick it. It doesn't matter. You want to do your own podcast? Look at John and look what he's accomplished here. You want to write? You want to, be a comedian? Whatever. Just pick what it is that makes your heart explode and dabble. Try it. See what happens. It's good for you. It's good for the soul, regardless of whether it becomes an avocation or a vocation. It's just good.
Yeah, it's hard to take that first step, and he's gotten really good at taking those first steps, and it's brought him this far. And the other thing that I realize is just local to us, but this podcast throws a pretty wide net. In the show notes is his website. Go and get in touch with him, get on his mailing list, because he does have great guests come to his house and put on shows, as you'll see in the video. He's had, the great and the near great come through and play in that little, 25, 29 seat theater, whatever it was.
We're going.
when we're going to go and see Mike Caveney and Tina Leonard.
Couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, it's so get on that list, and if you live an hour and a half drive away, it's worth an hour and a half to come and see that sort of thing. The last thing that stuck out for me in talking to Matt, and a lot of things did, but one was where he said, if I had not gone to the West Coast Wizards Magic Camp, I don't think I'd be doing this today.
Yeah.
And I think just about everybody can look back at one point in their life, a turning point, and go, yeah, there are lots of things that could have happened, but because I made that one choice, that's where I am. And I don't want you to overthink choices at that point, but you never know where it's going to lead, saying yes to things. And I learned that from you, the concept of just say yes. Whenever possible, say yes.
It won't kill you.
It won't. And
It
it
won't
can
kill
always
you.
lead to really interesting places.
It almost always does. And so don't let your fear stop you from stepping out there.
Yeah.
Somebody calls you and wants you to do something, or is interested in having you be a part of something, or just invites you to something. Say yes. Get out there. See what might come. It's never a bad idea. Really, it isn't. Get out there, for the love of Pete. So let's all get out there. And I'm saying this for both myself and you, John. We need to get out more. We simply have to get out more.
It's true. It's so much easier to stay in.
It really is. And we're in the golden age of television right now. There is so much good that it's hard to say, well, I think I'll go out, because you can stay here and be entertained at the highest level right in your own living room.
Yeah. So here's what we'll say. Just say no to drugs. Say yes to everything else.
Yeah. Or say yes to drugs too. I don't
Jim.
want to tell people what to do. Kids, if you're listening, say no to drugs. And then when you're an adult, do what you want.
Coming from you, who's the most drug-free.
I really am.
You keep your temple clean.
I really do. But
you really do.
But by that same token, I don't want to tell anybody else to clean their temple. Your temple is your temple. How you keep control of it and what you put in it is entirely up to you. I would suggest not drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, or taking drugs. But I'm not in charge. I'm barely in charge of me.
Yeah, that's true. But I know there are things in your life that you love, and maybe you could tell me one of them that we could call one of those I love that segment pieces.
I would be happy to. You know what a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen I am.
I've heard that.
Yeah. There is a new documentary on
What I meant to say, I've heard that, was driving to Iowa, 4 hours down, 4 hours back. That's all that's playing on the radio.
All
That's
Springsteen
what I meant
all the time.
I've heard that. But yes, please continue.
Yeah, I got Sirius radio simply because there's a Bruce Springsteen station on there.
Yeah.
There's a brand new documentary about little Stevie Van Zandt called Disciple on HBO, and it is so good. Yeah. It's really great.
When you're overseas, people don't look at you like a guitar player or a cab driver. You're an American. I never thought of myself as an American. I'm from New Jersey.
Stop the world for a minute. He was a great performer, great songwriter, great producer.
I love his enthusiasm and encyclopedic knowledge of music.
He's a businessman. He's a philanthropist. He really is a Renaissance man.
I'm losing my balls over here! Miami Steve was a character that I was playing in the E Street Band. The Dean Martin in our rock and roll Rat Pack.
We were so close, I just wanted him near me. He just became my rock and roll brother instantly, But he did need to take his shot.
15 years. We finally made it. And I quit the night before payday.
So if there's my I love you, I love Bruce Springsteen. This is his sort of wartime consigliere. He was Tony Soprano's wartime consigliere.
A fascinating man.
He really is. I love Bruce Springsteen. I love everything to do with Bruce Springsteen. Go to HBO and watch Disciple, the Stevie Van Zandt documentary. It's terrific.
For my choice this episode, because we are in the midst of The Miser's Dream, which is essentially a locked room mystery in which someone was killed in a room and they can't figure out how the killer got out. I was reminded of a series that I watched very early on in the Eli Marks canon, probably while writing The Ambitious Card, because it's all about locked room mysteries. It's a British series called Jonathan Creek. It stars Alan Davies. I think there's 5 seasons, about 30 episodes. Each one is, I think, 90 minutes long. And each one of them is a locked room mystery that he solves. He is, not so coincidentally, the guy who creates all the illusions for a big-time magician. The magician doesn't play a huge part in it, but Jonathan Creek's understanding of illusion does play a big part.
Pursued by a haunting force.
If you're saying this is about a murder, I think you should be talking to the police.
The police were there.
Driven to the edge of sanity.
God, like I can't be destroyed.
A riddle from beyond the grave.
Stop thinking with your mouth for a second. Give your brain a chance to function.
It's not who, it's how.
Fine, just checking then. It is completely and utterly impossible.
Jonathan Creek, Sunday 9:15, BBC One.
Right now it's on BritBox. As we're recording this, these things move around. You might be able to find it on YouTube as well.
What's it called, John?
It's called Jonathan Creek. And that is his name. He lives in, I think, a windmill. And he, like other, like your Columbos, murder happens. We don't necessarily know who the killer
like your
is.
Eli Marks.
Like Eli Marks. And he is brought in to look at the circumstances and what appears to be usually an impossible situation. They're all fascinating. Alan Davis is a charming. I think he started as a stand-up. Charming guy. But anyway, highly recommended. Called Jonathan Creek. You can find it right now on BritBox, and in the future, who knows where.
Those are two good I love that's. I'll do both of them. I've done one. I'll do the other.
Cool. I'll watch yours as well because I love Stevie.
You know what we should do, though, is we should really get to the business at hand and hear a chapter of the book.
We should. This is episode 19. So do you want to hear what happened in chapter 18?
I think it's always best if we do look back and you catch us up.
All right, so in chapter 18, Randall Glendower was interrogated. Eli revisits the front of Clifford Thomas's house on Summit Avenue and looks over at the Summit Club, sees the Kavanaugh Tower in the distance. He checks on the online sale he's put up for his fake version of London After Midnight. He has a visit from Mrs. Tyler James. As he prepares to leave, he runs into Harry outside the shop, and as they're talking, snow and ice from the roof fall and knock them both out. And that takes us right into chapter 19.
Chapter 19. I must have been out for only a matter of seconds, but tracking time at that moment was not my first concern. I sat up quickly and instantly wished I hadn't. Black spots darted back and forth in front of my eyes, while wet snow and ice were slipping behind my collar and sliding down my back. Clearly, a huge chunk of ice and snow had plummeted off the roof. Despite the pain and confusion, the cold, wet sting of the snow produced a thought from out of the blue. This idea hit me as hard as the icy boulder which had plummeted off the roof, and then it instantly melted away, like the Arctic trickle currently running down the back of my neck. I tried to remember the thought which had seemed so bright and important for the brief second I had held it in my head. And now it was gone. I squinted up, not really knowing what I was looking for. And then I remembered Harry. He was next to me, lying sprawled on the sidewalk, one side of his face pressed against the cold, wet ground. Scattered around him were chunks of ice and snow, the remnants of what had hit us before slamming us into the sidewalk. My instinct was to roll him over, but I stopped myself, recognizing there could be some sort of spinal injury. I leaned in close and said his name, but got no response. However, he was breathing, which I took as a minimal good sign. I looked up to see a small crowd had gathered and people were asking me questions, but my head was so scrambled I couldn't make sense of the words. I reflexively grabbed for my phone, but then the sound of an approaching siren told me someone in the crowd had already effectively handed that one detail for me. I looked back down at Harry. His eyelids were fluttering just a bit, and I noticed that his hat had been knocked off. For some unknown reason, I felt the intense and overpowering need to find his hat and tried to stand up, but my knees gave out, and I went down again. I was conscious when the EMTs arrived, so as I saw them approach, I gestured them toward Harry. I'll be okay. Take care of him. I'll be okay. I sensed I was at least minimally correct in my assessment. My third attempt to sit up was far more successful than my first, and the black spots, which floated in front of my eyes, were diminishing to gray specks as my cognitive powers, such as they were, began to return. The idea, which had burned so brightly after the snowy impact, was still gone, but other than that, my faculties seemed to be returning. Moments later, I found myself sitting on the curb, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, as the way too young EMT shined a light in first one eye and then the other.
He's doing fine. We've got him immobilized, and his vital signs look good.
Is he conscious? A momentary hesitation on her part, and then her professional tone returned in full.
Not currently, but his vital signs look good. We're going to get him into the ambulance and then get one for you.
I shook my head and regretted it immediately. I want to ride with Harry. I can sit up. I can sit up and back. She gave me a long look.
You're not going to hurl in the back of my wagon, are you?
I almost shook my head, then wisely thought better of it. I promised to be hurl-free for the duration of the ride.
Sounds like a plan. Let us get him situated first.
She got up and I turned and watched as they lifted Harry strapped to a backboard to the stretcher and then into the ambulance. The EMT assisted me to my feet, and we were making the short walk from the curb to the ambulance when I heard a short scream. The crowd that had gathered turned in the direction of the sound and then parted. A woman with blood running down her face had stumbled out of the theater and was staggering toward us. It took me a moment to recognize it was Tracy. The triage personnel in the ER determined Harry was their first priority, followed by Tracy, with me bringing up a distant third. So distant, in fact, that after a quick assessment, my treatment took place in the waiting room and consisted of 2 ibuprofen for my pain and a cold compress for the bump on my head. In their defense, we weren't the only emergency in the ER that evening, with people of all sizes, sicknesses, and injuries streaming in at a dizzying pace. The doctor who looked me over asked me to stay for at least an hour so he could give me another quick check before I took off. I told him I wasn't going anywhere without Harry and asked him when I could get in to see him. His answer as he walked away was authoritative and diplomatic and boiled down to the medical version of, "When we say you can." A vibration in my pocket reminded me that the room was plastered with signs instructing me to turn off my cell phone. I snuck a peek and saw it was a text from Megan. "What's going on? Heard there was an accident." I shielded the phone from prying eyes and composed a short, non-hysterical text to the effect that Harry and I were in the ER and I would call when they let me out. I had barely hit send when a message came buzzing back at me. On my way. There's probably no more helpless feeling than sitting in the waiting room of the ER while someone you love is behind a locked door marked staff only. Staring at it intently seemed to have no perceptible effect, so I eventually gave up on that and spent the next 20 minutes going through a really old Reader's Digest. After not chuckling once at life in these United States, which I'm sure was more a function of my mood than a reflection on the level of humor found in the anecdotes, I tried improving myself with the featured article, "I am Joe's pancreas." But after reading the sentence about how the pancreas contained features of 2 different glands, endocrine and exocrine, for the 5th time and still not understanding it, I shut the magazine and snuck another look at my phone.
You know, I count 5 signs which explicitly state you're not supposed to be using your phone here in the ER.
I looked up to see Deirdre. "What are you going to do? Arrest me?"
No, but I know people.
"What are you doing here?" "When 2 ambulances and a squad car are called to the address of a recent murder, you'd be amazed at how quickly word gets around." "Why a squad car?" And then I remembered Tracy's bleeding head. I'd been so dazed, I hadn't even stopped to consider why she had been bleeding. "What happened to Tracy?"
"Fred's talking to her right now. Seems she was jumped by someone in the theater. She said she saw the door to the roof had been opened, and when she went to investigate, she got hit on the head."
"Someone was on the theater's roof?"
perhaps. Or they were using that as an access point to the roof next door. I considered the implications of this. So the ice and snow that fell on Harry and me, that might have been on purpose? Deirdre shrugged with classic non-commitment. We're looking into it. What's the word on Harry? They're not telling me. And the more they don't tell me, the more worried I get. She pursed her lips, then patted my shoulder affectionately, which made me even more concerned. Let me go rattle some cages and see what I can find out. I started to get up, but her comforting hand shifted to a firm, commanding one, pushing me back down into my chair. You stay here and talk to your friends. I'll get a full report. What friends? But she was gone. I watched Deirdre move through the crowded waiting room and then realized she hadn't been sarcastic. I did recognize faces in the crowd. I recognized Megan, and behind her was Franny, both weaving their way through the huddled masses. I broke into a smile, and then saw right behind them was Quentin Moon. My smile faded and was instantly replaced with a fake one, which I hope no one could tell from the real thing. Eli, what happened? Megan pulled back the cold compress to check my head. How's Harry? Franny looked from me to the receptionist's desk and then back to me. Are they stonewalling? Deirdre's gone to get some answers. I have no idea. He was hit on the head. We both were, by some ice and snow that slid off the roof. He was unconscious. I don't know, I said. They haven't told me. Deirdre's gone to find out. I recognized I had started to repeat myself. Quentin stood awkwardly behind Megan, and we nodded to each other. We were debriefing last night's performance, he said, by way of explanation. Megan was too worried to drive, and of course Franny doesn't drive, so here we are. We both nodded again. At that moment, the person in the chair next to me got up, and Megan wasted no time sliding into the empty seat. She took my hand. What did they say? Not much, really, I said, trying to remember any tidbit which might have relevance. Thankfully, Deirdre chose this moment to return with an actual report. Here's what they know, she said to me after a brief acknowledgement of the others. It's a pretty severe concussion with a scalp wound that produced a lot of blood, but they currently don't think there's any internal bleeding. He's still unconscious, but his vital signs are good, and there is no indication of any spinal injury. They're going to take him down for a CAT scan and MRI. After that, they'll move him up to intensive care. You still look pale. Did you have dinner? I shook my head gingerly. You should eat something. She looked at the rest of the group. Why don't you take him down to the cafeteria? It's going to be a while before they know anything. She started to head away, but I grabbed the hem of her jacket. What about Tracy? What's going on with her? She looked back at me. They bandaged her up, and Fred is going to take her downtown and get a full statement. And Wright is bringing in Mrs. Tyler James and her, friend to ask about her connection, if any, to this assault and her earlier incident with the ladder. You mean when she was pushed off the ladder? You think this is connected? We're looking into that. Anyway, the doctor said if you're feeling okay, you can go. I put up a hand, but she cut me off. I explained you'd want to stick around to see how Harry's doing. She looked at Megan. Why don't you take him down to the cafeteria and get some food in him? Yeah, let's do that, Megan said as she got up. I'll let you know what we find out from Mrs. James, Deirdre said, then turned and headed toward the front door. I stood up, with Megan holding my elbow, an unnecessary but welcome gesture. I'm staying here, Franny said with finality as she slid into my empty seat, to keep an eye on Harry. I recognized that tone, and I knew it was pointless to argue with Franny when she got into that zone. Can we bring anything? I asked. If they have hot chocolate with little marshmallows, I wouldn't turn it down, she said, as she turned her attention toward the door marked, Staff Only. But if they don't have tiny marshmallows, don't bother. They did indeed offer hot chocolate with little marshmallows, so while I gathered some food for myself, Megan purchased a hot chocolate and headed back to the ER to deliver it to Franny while the drink was still relatively warm. This left me alone with Quentin and my tray of food. I'd missed the dinner rush when full meals were available,
so I assembled an odd collection of items: a scoop of cottage cheese, a small bowl of peaches, a slice of pizza, and a bowl of pudding, which made dietary mockery of the classic food pyramid. We had had our choice of tables, so I picked one by the window, which afforded us a view of the downtown skyline and the beginnings of yet another new snowfall. Under other circumstances, it would have been a pretty sight. "You picked an interesting time to come to Minnesota," I said to Quentin as I assembled my food selection in front of me. "You mean it isn't always like this?" "If you mean cold and snowy, then yes, it is always like this, except for 2 weeks in July when it's insufferably humid. But if you mean the murders and the police and the concussions and the ambulances, no, not so much." "It's a fascinating puzzle," he said, gesturing that I should go ahead and start eating. "And it gets more fascinating all the time," I agreed, surprised at how hungry I actually was. I spent the better part of the day listening to interviews with the 3 key suspects, and I'm no closer to figuring this out than I was before. "I thought there were 4 suspects." "There were 4, I said. He gave me a look that indicated I should continue. I pretended to be slowed down by the presence of food in my mouth, but in reality, I was weighing the pros and cons of actually asking for his help on this mystery. With the image of Harry sprawled out on the sidewalk burned into my brain, I decided that, at least for the time being, I would set my petty jealousies aside and add Quentin's brain power to the mix. With that decision made, I filled him in on the facts surrounding the recent death of Clifford Thomas. My recap was interrupted several times by a table across the room of what I was assuming were male nurses or orderlies telling stories and laughing loudly at the recounted antics of past patients. It appeared that after hours, when foot traffic in the hospital was diminished, the cafeteria became a de facto break room. "He didn't realize he'd been shot," one of the nurses was saying. "Didn't have a clue. He was just dropping off his brother when someone pointed out the blood stain on his back and the drops of blood on the floor." This produced knowing laughter from the table across the room. I turned back to Quentin. "All right, then," Quentin said, ticking the suspects off on his fingers. "You've got the big-hearted comic book store owner, the banker who collects and hides illegal art, and the executive who loves to swoop in and buy something out from under an unsuspecting buyer. And now one more late addition to the suspect list, the supposed wife of the first victim, Mrs. Tyler James, and her constant companion, Gunner." I gave Quentin the thumbnail version of my run-ins with Mrs. James and her friend Gunner, including Tracy's handy and effective threat of a baseball bat in the theater lobby. "Is that so?" he said. "It seems like this Mrs. James clearly thinks there is, or was, something of value in the projection booth." "There was," I said as I finished off the peaches and moved on to the pizza. "There was an envelope with $75,000 in cash, and at one point, a movie worth a whole lot more than that. She's just a little late to the party." "Perhaps," he said, looking off into the distance. "But just because we're only seeing her now doesn't mean she hasn't been lurking and working in the background for some time." I nodded. "Yes, I suppose that's true. And I would be willing to wager if you look at the statistics, wives kill husbands more than customers kill memorabilia dealers, as a general rule." I nodded as I took a taste of the pudding, which had presented itself as vanilla, but which turned out to be lemon. I looked up and noticed a puzzled look on Quentin's face, which probably matched my own, but for different non-culinary reasons. "What's up?" "Just had a notion. What kind of pet did you say the comic book store owner owns?" "A monkey," I said. Laughter from a table across the room required me to speak up. "A Javin McKay monkey." "I can tell you this much," one of the nurses said loudly. "I would want to get as far away from him as I could." This was followed by laughter and sounds of general agreement from the nurses, but something about this statement stuck in my head. I looked over to see Quentin smiling at me. I glanced around, not sure what I had done to inspire it.
I think I may have figured it out, Quentin said, leaning back in his chair. Figured what out? The murders, Quentin said with a grin. Well, the first one at least. But I'm assuming once we reveal the killer of the projectionist, that will take us post-haste to the killer of the mystery writer. In all likelihood, it's the same person. As annoying as this proclamation was, and believe me, it was, I couldn't shake the statement the nurse had just made. I wanted to get as far away from him as I could, I repeated. What? Quentin was leaning forward, but I was still following a train of thought, not sure where it would take me. For some reason, the nurse's statement triggered a memory. I was standing in the back doorway of the theater, looking out at the snowy alleyway. In my mind, I turned away from the doorway and stepped forward, parting the curtains and looking up at the dimly lit holes in the far wall which defined the projection booth in the murky light. At that point, I was about as far away from the booth as I could be and still be in the theater. But that wasn't it. The word stuck with me. I wanted to get as far away from him as I could. And then, like dominoes tipping over, seemingly random images started to connect in my brain, getting as far away from that guy as I could. The power and lack of permanence of an avalanche of ice and snow. One specific title from Clifford Thomas's list of potential book titles. Mrs. Tyler James's offhanded sports slur coupled with my stunning ignorance of athletics of any kind. Even conjoined movie titles, random as they were, suddenly all tied together in my head. I pulled out my phone. So you've solved the mystery? I asked as I opened Google and did a quick search. I believe I have, he said. Do you doubt me? I shook my head, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt. Not at all, I said as I scrolled quickly through an entry, confirming one key detail. I might be on my way to figuring it out as well. Before he could respond, we looked over to see Megan making her way through the cafeteria toward us, guiding Franny slowly toward our table. Megan's face was impossible to read, as was Franny's, and the more I tried, the more nervous I got. They finally arrived at our table and stood for a moment, both trembling. Franny's fingertips gripped the table's edge. It's Harry, Franny said, her voice cracking with emotion. He just woke up. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. They say he's going to be okay. He's going to be just fine, Megan added. With this important news safely delivered, Franny and Megan broke into huge smiles, and I was quick to join them. The yells and whoops from our table startled the other people in the cafeteria, including the nurses, but none of them seemed annoyed at our emotional outburst. In fact, the table full of nurses even applauded.
Wow.
Wow. All right.
Good chapter.
Yes. Once again, Eli in the hospital. It's interesting because I think we've both spent more time in hospitals than we would have liked. And there is just something about a hospital cafeteria. It's got a mood to it of stuff's going on around you. And it's this little island of a bowl of Fruit Loops or a cup of pudding or some fruit cup.
Why choose?
Yeah.
Get them all.
And then you go back in. And it's this little moment between Quentin and Eli. It's a very humanizing moment. And it's interesting for me because they have both figured out the answer to the mystery, and we're going to find out in the next chapter what that answer is.
I can hardly wait.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And that's next time. We're also going to be revisiting part of a conversation we had a couple years back with Derek and Nick DeFont talking about comedy and magic.
Two very funny guys and also great magicians. So look forward to that, folks. Chapter 20 of The Miser's Dream. And as John said, a great snippet from our chat with Derek Hughes and Nick DeFont. That's all next time on Behind the Page.
Take care.
Bye-bye, everybody.
This has been Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and Jim Cunningham. Produced by Alberts Bridge Books at Grass Lake Studios. Find this podcast and all the books in the Eli Marks series at EliMarksMysteries.com. That's ELIMARKS Mysteries.com. And thanks for listening.